Have you ever wondered why certain moments happen in your life? Why some doors close, while others suddenly open? Why sometimes you end up in places you never planned to be? What if the difficult seasons of your life were actually preparing you for a moment bigger than yourself? This is the story of Esther, a young Jewish girl who lost her parents, a girl raised far from home, inside a foreign empire. She was not born into royalty. She was not powerful. She was not famous. But one day, she would stand in the center of a crisis that threatened an entire nation, and her decision would change history forever. The Persian Empire was enormous. Its influence stretched across vast lands and countless cities. At the center of it all sat King Ahasuerus, a ruler known for power, wealth, and authority. His palace overflowed with luxury. Gold decorations lined the halls. Servants moved constantly through giant rooms filled with rich fabrics, marble pillars, and expensive treasures. Everything about the empire displayed one message: power. And one day, the king decided to display that power publicly. He organized a massive royal celebration. For many days, nobles, military leaders, princes, and officials gathered for feasting and drinking. The palace became louder each night. Music echoed through the halls. Wine flowed freely. The king wanted everyone to see his greatness. Then, during the celebration, he made a decision that would change the future of the empire. He called for Queen Vashti. He wanted her brought before the guests, not for wisdom, not for leadership, but so everyone could admire her beauty. But Queen Vashti refused. The entire atmosphere changed. The king was humiliated. His advisors panicked. If word spread that the queen had publicly refused the king, what would happen throughout the empire? Would other women begin refusing their husbands too? The advisors urged the king to act quickly. So the king removed Vashti as queen, and suddenly, the throne beside the king became empty. No one realized it yet, but that empty throne was opening the door for Esther. Far from the palace, living among the Jewish people in exile, was a young woman named Esther. Her Hebrew name was Hadassah, but most people knew her as Esther. She had experienced loss early in life. Her parents had died when she was young. She grew up under the care of her older cousin, Mordecai. To Esther, Mordecai was more than family. He became protector, teacher, guide. He raised her carefully, and despite living inside a foreign empire, he taught her not to forget who she was. Esther grew into a young woman known for grace, beauty, and kindness. But her life still seemed ordinary. No one could have imagined what was coming. After some time passed, the king's servants proposed an idea. Search the empire for beautiful young women. Bring them to the palace, and let the king choose a new queen. Soon, women from across the empire were gathered. Among them, Esther. Imagine how overwhelming it must have felt. Leaving home, entering the palace, walking through giant royal halls filled with strangers. Everything was unfamiliar. The rules, the customs, the pressure. Before Esther entered the palace, Mordecai gave her one important instruction: do not reveal that you are Jewish. So Esther kept her identity hidden. Inside the palace, Esther quickly stood out, not because she fought for attention, not because she tried to impress people, but because something about her spirit was different. She listened carefully. She treated people respectfully. She carried herself with quiet wisdom. The attendants noticed. The servants respected her. And eventually, the king noticed her too. Out of all the women brought before him, Esther became his favorite. And soon, the orphan girl from exile became queen of Persia. But Esther still did not understand why her life had taken this path. Not yet. While Esther adjusted to palace life, Mordecai continued working near the king's gate. One day, he overheard something alarming. Two royal officials were secretly planning to assassinate the king. Mordecai immediately sent word through Esther. The plot was investigated. The officials were executed. And Mordecai's loyalty was recorded in the royal records. At the time, nothing more happened. No reward, no public recognition. just a forgotten note written into history. But that small moment would become extremely important later. As time passed, a man named Haman rose in power. The king promoted him above the other officials. Haman loved power, loved recognition, loved being admired. Whenever he walked through the city gates, people bowed before him. Everyone, except Mordecai. Mordecai refused. Day after day, Haman noticed it. At first, it irritated him. Then it consumed him. When he discovered Mordecai was Jewish, his anger expanded beyond one man. Haman decided he wanted to destroy all the Jewish people throughout the empire. Not because of war, not because of rebellion, but because of hatred. Haman approached the king carefully. He described the Jewish people as different, as disobedient, as dangerous. Then he proposed a horrifying decree. Destroy them all. Men, women, children. The king agreed. A date was selected, and messages were sent throughout the empire announcing the destruction of the Jewish people. Imagine the fear that spread. Families reading the decree, parents holding children, entire communities realizing they had been marked for death. And inside the palace, Queen Esther still did not know everything happening outside. When Mordecai heard the decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and cried openly in the city. Across the empire, Jewish people mourned with fasting, grief, and prayer. When Esther heard about Mordecai's condition, she became deeply troubled. She sent servants to discover what had happened. Mordecai sent her a copy of the decree. Then came the message that changed Esther's life forever. Go to the king. Plead for your people. But Esther hesitated. Approaching the king without invitation was dangerous. Anyone who entered uninvited could be killed instantly, unless the king extended his golden scepter. And Esther had not been summoned for many days. Fear filled her heart. Then Mordecai responded with words history would never forget. Do not think you will escape because you are in the palace. Then he said, and who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Those words pierced Esther deeply. Maybe this was why she became queen. Maybe her life had been preparing her for this exact moment. Esther made her decision. She told Mordecai, gather the Jewish people. Fast for me for 3 days. My servants and I will fast too. Then she said, if I perish, I perish. Those words revealed something powerful. Esther was afraid. But courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is obedience despite fear. For 3 days, Esther fasted and prayed. The palace grew quiet. The tension grew heavier. Then finally, the day arrived. The royal court stood silent. Officials lined the room. Then the doors opened. Esther entered. Every eye turned toward her. Everything depended on the king's next reaction. Would he reject her? Would she die right there? The king looked up. Then, he extended the golden scepter. Relief flooded the room. Esther was safe. The king welcomed her warmly. What is your request? But Esther answered wisely. Instead of immediately exposing Haman, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, the king again asked a request. Still, Esther waited. She invited them to another banquet the next day. Meanwhile, Haman left feeling proud, honored, important, until he saw Mordecai again, still refusing to bow. The rage returned instantly. So Haman ordered a massive gallows built, planning to execute Mordecai publicly. But that very night, everything changed. That night, the king could not sleep. So he ordered the royal records to be read aloud. As they read, they came across the forgotten account of Mordecai uncovering the assassination plot. The king was surprised. What reward was given to Mordecai? None. At that exact moment, Haman entered the court. He came intending to ask permission to execute Mordecai. But before he could speak, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman assumed the king meant him. So he described a grand public celebration, royal robes, the king's horse, public praise throughout the city. Then the king said, excellent. Do all of that for Mordecai. Haman was humiliated. The man he hated most was now publicly honored. and Haman's downfall had already begun. At the second banquet, the king asked Esther once again, "What do you want?" This time, Esther finally spoke openly. She revealed her identity. She was Jewish, and her people had been marked for destruction. Then she revealed the one responsible, Haman. The king exploded with anger. Haman panicked. The powerful man who once felt untouchable now begged for mercy. But the king ordered Haman executed on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. The trap he prepared for another became his own downfall. But one problem remained. The original decree still existed. So Esther approached the king again. This time, a new decree was issued. The Jewish people were allowed to defend themselves. When the appointed day came, their enemies were defeated, and what was meant to become a day of destruction became a day of victory. Mourning turned into celebration. Fear turned into joy. And the Jewish people established the Feast of Purim to remember how everything changed. Esther's story is not only about royalty. It is about purpose, about courage, about stepping forward when it would be easier to stay silent. Esther did not begin powerful. She began as an orphan girl, hidden, unknown. But when history demanded courage, she answered. And because one young woman chose bravery over comfort, an entire people survived. Maybe you're facing a moment right now, a decision, a risk, a challenge, and maybe you are exactly where you're meant to be for such a time as this.